It had been 6 months since Evelyn Carver buried her husband and hung the for rent sign outside the old schoolhouse she now called home. The town of Dead Elm didn't trust a woman teaching, let alone one living alone, and she'd learned quick to keep her head down and her shotgun closer. The dog showed up on the coldest morning of the year, matted fur, a crooked tail, and eyes too intelligent to ignore. He didn't bark, didn't beg, just sat on her porch like he'd always lived there. Evelyn tossed a biscuit toward him and watched him eat it without blinking. The next night, he was still there. By the third, he was curled outside her door, sleeping like he'd done it 100 times. She never named him, though folks started calling him Ghost because he never left her shadow. The dog wouldn't enter the house, no matter how bad the wind howled. He guarded the threshold, silent and watchful. It made some uneasy, especially Judge Cobb, who ran the town with a grip like iron and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "That mutt's bad luck," he spat one afternoon as he passed her porch. "Ought to be put down." Evelyn said nothing, but her fingers curled tighter around her broom. That night, she tucked a wool blanket outside for Ghost and lit the lantern twice. The town didn't know it, but she'd once been a nurse in a war that took more than it gave. She'd seen men die with less dignity than that dog carried in his spine. The morning it happened, she'd left early to fetch firewood. When she returned, her breath caught. Judge Cobb stood on her porch, shotgun raised, Ghost growling low and steady. "He bit my son," Cobb lied. Evelyn saw the boy behind him, unharmed, grinning, cruel. Before she could speak, a voice cut through the cold. "Put the gun down." A Lakota brave, young but firm in his step, stepped out from the tree line, eyes locked on the judge. "That's not your dog to shoot." Cobb scoffed. "And who the hell says that?" The brave's voice didn't waver. "That's my brother's soul." Silence fell like snow, heavy and impossible to brush off. Evelyn looked between them. Her porch, her dog, the man who had just changed everything. She didn't know what any of it meant, but she knew one thing. The dog who wouldn't come inside had just been claimed by someone who saw more than fur and teeth. He saw memory, he saw blood, and maybe he saw a second chance. Evelyn didn't move. The judge's shotgun hovered mid-air, his eyes darting between her and the young Lakota man, like he was trying to decide who'd make the easier target. The dog, Ghost, stood planted between them, fur raised but unmoving, like he understood the stakes. "This is settler land," Cobb growled, stepping down off the porch, his boots cracking against the frozen soil. "You think some ghost tale's gonna stop the law?" The Lakota brave held his ground, hands empty but presence firm. "Your law ends where memory begins," he said quietly, gaze fixed on Ghost. "And my brother's memory runs deeper than this town's fences." Cobb spat in the dirt, muttered something ugly under his breath, and stalked off, dragging his son by the collar. Evelyn watched him go, her breath shallow in the winter air. When she turned, the brave was kneeling beside the dog, his hand stretched palm up. "He knows me," the brave whispered. "He's not afraid." Ghost sniffed his hand, then rested his chin on it like a child returning home. Evelyn stepped forward, heart pounding in ways she didn't yet understand. "You said he's your brother?" she asked. "Was." The brave rose slowly. "Killed 4 winters ago by white scouts who mistook medicine for threat. His body was never found. My dreams led me here." Evelyn folded her arms to hide the chill crawling up her spine. She'd seen dreams drive men mad during the war, but this felt like something else. "He came to me," she murmured. "That night the storm hit, he found me in the snow, pulled at my coat, wouldn't stop until I followed him back to the house." The brave nodded, solemn. He doesn't remember his name, not fully, but he remembers loyalty. Ghost let out a low, mournful sound and sat at the brave's feet. The fire Evelyn had kindled earlier in the stove crackled behind the screen door, casting soft light across the porch. She gestured for him to sit. "You want coffee?" The brave hesitated, then nodded once. "Name's Taima," he said. "Means crash of thunder." Evelyn blinked. "You're calm for thunder." He gave a faint smile. "Even thunder sleeps sometimes." As they sat in the growing dark, she poured 2 tin cups and watched him sip. Ghost settled between them. Evelyn didn't know what story she'd stumbled into, but tonight it wasn't just her house that was haunted. The past had come calling, and it had 4 legs, a scarred muzzle, and eyes that wouldn't stop watching the door. Morning came with frost on the windows and silence in the yard. Taima had slept outside beside Ghost, his coat wrapped around his shoulders and his back against the porch rail. Evelyn had offered the spare cot, but he'd declined without insult, as if sleeping under stars was a vow he couldn't break. She watched them now from the kitchen. Man and dog both still, breathing in sync, like 2 branches from the same wind-bent tree. She poured coffee and stepped outside. "You warm enough?" she asked. Taima opened one eye. "He sleeps better with me here." He scratched behind Ghost's ear. "He's calmer. I think he remembers more when he's close to home." "This is home?" she asked, surprised. "No," Taima said, "but yours is near something he's looking for." Evelyn tilted her head. "Like what?" Taima stood, brushing snow from his sleeves. "A grave." She blinked. "There's no graves here." "Not marked," he replied, "but I dreamed of a boy buried with a bone carving, not far from cedar trees. There's cedar behind your schoolhouse, yes?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Just a few. Ground's too hard in winter, though." Taima's gaze turned toward the trees. "It won't matter. He already knows where it is." That afternoon, Taima walked the back edge of the property with Ghost at his side. Evelyn followed at a distance, heart uneasy. When Ghost stopped near a half-collapsed woodpile behind the last cedar, he began to paw at the frozen ground. Taima knelt, brushed snow aside, and uncovered a faded strip of red cloth barely poking from the soil. Evelyn gasped. "I've never seen that before." Taima touched the cloth, reverently. "You weren't meant to. He was buried where no one would look." "Who would do that?" she asked, voice tight. "Men who kill and don't want to answer." Taima dug with bare hands, slow but steady, until the shape beneath the dirt revealed itself. Bones, wrapped in an old ceremonial wrap, still clinging to a carved animal totem in its chest. Evelyn fell silent. She couldn't breathe for the weight of it. A grave, right behind her home. All this time. Taima whispered something in Lakota, eyes closed, then stood. They thought hiding him would erase him. But souls don't vanish. Sometimes they come back on 4 legs. Evelyn looked at Ghost, now lying beside the grave like a watchman. "What do we do now?" she asked. Taima turned toward her, his voice low but clear. "We give him back to the land the right way, and then, maybe, he'll finally sleep." By sundown, word had already reached the saloon. "The widow's got bones buried in her yard," someone muttered between whiskey sips. By the next morning, 3 townsmen stood at Evelyn's gate, shovels in hand and suspicion in their eyes. "We heard you dug up an Indian," one barked, not bothering to introduce himself. "Grave digging's a crime, even for the good-hearted." Evelyn stood tall on her porch, arms crossed, Taima quiet beside her, Ghost growling low from beneath the steps. "He wasn't buried," she said. "He was hidden." The man stepped forward. "Now that sounds like an accusation. You calling someone in town a murderer? I'm saying someone buried a boy behind a schoolhouse and hoped winter would do the forgetting. The men exchanged looks. One spit. You got proof that grave's Indian? His name was Wicasa, Taima said evenly. He was a medicine boy. Taken during a raid, never returned. The totem on his chest bears my family's carving. The tallest man narrowed his eyes. You saying your kind owns this land now? No, Taima said, but we remember who bled on it. That evening, Judge Cobb came himself. Evelyn saw him coming up the path, coat flapping like a vulture's wings, anger pressed tight into his mouth. I warned you about that dog, he hissed, stopping short at the porch. Now you've got the whole town whispering curses and war stories. You buried a boy behind my house, she shot back. Or you knew who did. Either way, you're not angry about the bones. You're angry they were found. Cobb stepped closer. You think anyone cares about an old ghost and a mutt? The only thing that'll come of this is trouble. Maybe troubles do, she said. Cobb turned, but before he could leave, Ghost barked, once, sharp, loud. He froze. That dog's a problem, he muttered. Mark my words. Next time it steps off this porch, it won't return. Evelyn's voice came steel-edged. Then neither will I. That night, she couldn't sleep. She paced the floors, kettle forgotten on the stove, the town's threat coiled like a noose in her ribs. Outside, Ghost curled beside the grave, Taima keeping silent vigil beside him. The wind howled. But Evelyn wasn't scared of the cold. She was scared of what the town might try next, afraid that truth was never enough when men needed a lie to feel powerful. But beneath that cedar, a boy was finally seen. A soul had come home. And she'd defend it, no matter what the town thought of ghosts. The next morning, smoke drifted over the horizon before Evelyn smelled the burn. She ran outside barefoot, heart hammering, just as Taima stepped out from the trees with a bundle of sage and a quiet warning. Someone lit the edge of your woodpile, he said. It didn't catch, but it was meant as a message. The soil where Wicasa's bones had been uncovered was now blackened around the edges. Ash dusted over the ceremonial cloth like spiteful snow. Ghost stood guard, singed fur on one side, but unharmed. Evelyn dropped to her knees beside him. They tried to burn him out, she whispered, rage and grief twisting together in her throat. They want him forgotten again. Taima crouched beside her, his face unreadable. They're afraid, he said softly, of what he reminds them. That blood was spilled, and it wasn't theirs to take. She looked at him. Can't we move him? Somewhere safer? Taima shook his head. He chose this spot. The dreams didn't lead me to a mountain or a cave. They led me here, to you. I think he wanted to be remembered. Evelyn stared at the scorched ground. Then we make it sacred. They spent the day clearing debris, digging a proper space beneath the cedar, laying stones around the grave in a tight circle. Taima sang in his native tongue as he worked, the melody low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat against the wind. Ghost didn't leave the graveside once. When evening fell, Evelyn brought out her husband's old flagstone marker, the one she couldn't bring herself to use when he died. She scrubbed it clean and set it beside the others. Taima didn't ask questions. He simply nodded. He has a name now. Wicasa, she repeated. It felt good in her mouth, heavy with history. That night, they lit a fire just outside the ring of stones. Evelyn sat across from Taima, both of them wrapped in silence that didn't feel empty. You think they'll come back? She asked. Cobb and the rest? Taima looked into the flames. They always come back when truth stands in plain sight. She nodded slowly. Then let them. For the first time, the fire didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a boundary, a line drawn in light and memory. Ghost lay beside her, eyes half closed but ears twitching. Wikasa's spirit, if it truly lived in that body, had endured fire, exile, and erasure. And now, beneath a cedar tree behind a widow's schoolhouse, it had finally found a home. 3 days passed without trouble, but the town's silence felt louder than threats. Evelyn taught her handful of students as usual, though fewer children came, and their eyes darted toward the windows more than their readers. Parents had begun pulling them home early, whispering about curses and the dead walking in animal skins. She overheard a boy mutter, "My pa says the widow's got a ghost dog that bites sinners." Evelyn didn't correct him. Let fear do what it must. That afternoon, a sound broke the hush of her lessons, low, steady drumming from beyond the schoolyard. Evelyn stepped out and saw him, a boy, maybe 11, sitting cross-legged near Wikasa's grave, tapping a handheld drum against his knee. Ghost sat beside him like a sentinel. The boy didn't look up. He just kept playing, the rhythm old and patient, like water finding its way through stone. Taima appeared beside her, as if summoned. "That's Misu," he said. "His mother was my cousin. He dreams too." "He came here alone?" she asked. "He followed Ghost," Taima replied. "Didn't need to be told." The students gathered at the windows, some pressing hands to the glass. The rhythm carried across the yard, not loud but impossible to ignore. Misu's drum beats seemed to quiet even the wind. Evelyn crossed the yard and knelt beside the boy. "Do you know who's buried here?" Misu nodded without missing a beat. "He comes in my sleep, shows me rivers, teaches me how to watch the sky." He stopped playing and finally looked at her. "He said you were kind, that you didn't treat him like a dog." Her throat tightened. "I didn't know who he was." "But you saw he mattered," the boy said. "That's what counts." That night, Evelyn baked cornbread and made stew. She invited Misu to stay in the back room, and he accepted without hesitation. Taima laid blankets by the hearth. Ghost, for the first time, walked fully into the schoolhouse and lay down beside the fire. No hesitation. No glance back. As the house filled with warmth and quiet breath, Evelyn realized something had shifted. Wikasa's grave was no longer just a wound in the yard. It was a center, a gathering place, a heartbeat. And now there was a boy drumming stories back into the soil, a brave keeping watch, and a dog who wasn't just a dog anymore. He was memory made flesh, and memory, when honored, has a way of drawing the right souls home. By dawn, the drumming had stopped, but something else had arrived in its place. Evelyn stepped outside with her coffee and froze at the edge of the porch. Red paint streaked the front of the barn in angry, crude letters. "Get rid of it, or we burn it all." The words dripped in the morning frost like blood on cold steel. Ghost stood beside the porch, low growl rumbling in his chest. Taima joined her seconds later, face calm but jaw tight. "Cobb," Evelyn said flatly, "or someone he sent." "They're escalating," Taima murmured. "Threats become fire. Fire becomes death." Evelyn's hand clenched the tin cup. "Then we answer before they light the match." She spent the morning boarding up windows, while Taima reinforced the barn door. Misu stayed indoors, watching from the shadows, the drum resting like a shield beside him. That afternoon, the town sent its answer in flesh. Cobb arrived with 3 men on horseback, rifles slung loose, boots hard on dry earth. Evelyn stood in front of the porch, shotgun cradled in her arms, not raised, yet. Taima stood beside her, unarmed but unmoving. Ghost took position at their feet. "This has gone far enough," Cobb called out, voice full of false reason. You got people scared. Kids ain't sleeping. Women crossing the street to avoid your kind. Good, Evelyn said. Means they're awake. Cobb narrowed his eyes. We're offering you a chance. Send the mutt to the hills. Send the Indian with him. And the boy too, if you know what's smart. Or what? She asked. You'll burn down a schoolhouse? Grave and all? Cobb's smirk didn't reach his eyes. Wouldn't be the first time bad things were cleaned up for good men. Silence fell. Then Taima spoke, voice like stone. We buried one secret already. Try again, and the earth won't be as forgiving. Cobb opened his mouth, but Ghost stepped forward with a bark so loud it echoed across the yard. The horses reared slightly, spooked, and Cobb's men hesitated. Evelyn raised her shotgun, not to fire, but to be seen. For a moment no one moved. Then Cobb spat in the dirt and wheeled his horse around. Last warning, he snapped. Next time it won't be paint. The riders disappeared in a cloud of dust. Evelyn let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You think they'll come back tonight? She asked. Taima didn't look at her. He was watching the road, where the dust hadn't yet settled. They'll come when the moon's high, he said. But so will we. Ghost sat between them, eyes fixed forward. The war hadn't started, but the lines had been drawn. The moon rose full and pale above the pines, casting silver across the schoolhouse roof and turning every shadow into a warning. Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat by the window with the shotgun across her lap, the room lit only by a single oil lamp. Taima stood outside near the grave, fire crackling softly at his feet, smoke spiraling upward in thin, sacred curls. Misu sat beside Ghost, drum in his lap, hands resting but ready. The air had changed, thicker, slower, as if even time was holding its breath. It'll be tonight, Taima had said, and Evelyn believed him. Around midnight they heard the hooves, faint at first, then growing, then stopping. A dozen men, maybe more, gathered at the edge of the property, rifles slung across their backs and torches gripped in their fists. Cobb stood at the front, his hat low, his voice cold. One last offer, he called out. Hand over the dog and the Indian, and we let the schoolhouse stand. Evelyn stepped onto the porch, shotgun in hand. And if we say no? Then we cleanse this land the old way. The old way, she repeated. Like you did to Wicasa? A few men shifted uneasily. Cobb sneered. That's history. Doesn't concern you. It concerns me, said Misu, stepping forward, drum now strapped across his chest. He began to play. Slow, steady, the beat rolling like distant thunder. The wind rose with it, swirling the smoke from Taima's fire in wild loops. Stop that, Cobb barked. That's devil work. But the men didn't move. Something in the air had changed. The smoke thickened, curling around them like fingers. Ghost stepped into the firelight, his form almost glowing, and let out a deep, echoing howl that didn't sound like any dog they'd ever known. The horses screamed and pulled against their reins. One rider was thrown, another dropped his torch and stumbled backward. What in hell? Someone muttered. Taima raised his arms, voice steady as he chanted in Lakota, each word ringing like a bell struck deep underground. Shadows flickered behind him, brief images in the smoke, a boy's face, a hand reaching, fire over cedar. The past had come to testify. Cobb raised his rifle, aiming at Ghost, but before he could fire, Evelyn stepped in front. You'll have to shoot through me. Her voice didn't shake. Her grip didn't loosen. Cobb stared at her, then at the boy drumming, the man chanting, the dog who wasn't just a dog. His rifle dropped. Let's go, he snapped. This land's cursed. And one by one the mob vanished into the trees. Smoke cleared. The moon watched, and the dead slept undisturbed. The night retreated slow and quiet, leaving behind ashes that hadn't burned and a schoolhouse still standing. Evelyn stepped out just before dawn, boots crunching over frosted earth. The cedar trees shimmered with frost, but the air no longer felt heavy. It felt clean. Taima sat beside Wikasa's grave, smoke rising from the last of the sage bundle, his face calm but lined with exhaustion. Misu slept curled beside Ghost, the drum still hugged to his chest like a child holding onto a heartbeat. Evelyn lowered herself beside Taima without speaking. For a while, they just listened to the wind. Then she asked, "Did we win?" He didn't answer right away. "They won't return soon," he said finally. "But people like Cobb don't vanish. They just wait for quiet to feel like permission." "Then we stay loud," she murmured. "We keep this place from being forgotten." Taima nodded once, then took something from his coat. A small carved figure, an animal with wings spread wide, smoothed by years of handling. "This belonged to Wikasa," he said. "My grandfather carved it before the soldiers came. It's the last thing that tied our families." He placed it carefully atop the grave marker, then rose. Now he has everything he was denied. Evelyn stared at the figure, feeling tears sting her eyes. "You're leaving, aren't you?" "For now," Taima said. "Misu will stay. This place, it's for him now. You gave him something no one else would." "A roof?" she asked, half smiling. "A memory that isn't soaked in pain," he said. "That's rarer than roofs." She stood as well, brushing frost from her skirt. "You'll come back?" "When the snow thaws," he said. "When stories start to fade again, that's when we're needed most." Misu stirred, blinking at the sunrise, and Ghost stood to stretch beside him. The boy rubbed his eyes and looked up. "You're really leaving?" Taima walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't need me here to keep the song going." Misu looked down at the drum, then at Evelyn. "You'll teach me?" "If you teach me too," she replied, smiling. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the yard, Evelyn realized the schoolhouse no longer felt like a widow's last refuge. It felt like a beginning, a place where a buried child found his name again, where a dog held the soul of a brother, where the living guarded the past not with fear, but with fire and music and truth. And though the town might still whisper, the land had already answered. It had chosen its keepers. Spring arrived slowly in that part of the world, like a visitor unsure if it would be welcome. Snow melted in ribbons down the hills, and wildflowers pushed up shyly from the thawing earth. At the schoolhouse, life had settled into a rhythm as sure as any church bell. Misu took over sweeping the steps each morning before lessons, and Evelyn found that the boy had a way with younger children, even the ones who once feared Ghost. The dog, now more myth than mutt, had become part guardian, part legend. Townsfolk no longer approached the fence. Some still crossed the street when Evelyn came to town, but they did so quietly now, reverently almost. Cobb hadn't been seen in weeks, though someone said he'd left for Montana Territory to start fresh. Evelyn didn't miss him. The cedar tree behind the school had grown its first green shoots of the season. Taima's carved bird still perched on Wikasa's stone, untouched by wind or time. Every so often, Evelyn would catch Misu speaking softly at the grave, not praying exactly, more like checking in. One afternoon, Evelyn received a letter stamped with no return address. Inside, a single sentence written in Taima's careful hand. "The boy drums clearly now. You've done your part." That night, Evelyn lit a small fire beside the cedar, and Misu played one of the songs Taima had taught him, Ghost lying between them like a shadow turned warm. When the melody ended, Evelyn spoke the names aloud. Wikasa, Taima, Misu, Ghost, her own. She realized none of them were forgotten now. Each had been carried, remembered, spoken into the open air. "Will they come back?" Misu asked, eyes watching the sky. "Cobb? The others?" Evelyn looked at the boy's drum, the dog, the grave. "Maybe," she said. "But we'll be ready." Days turned into weeks. The children kept learning. The garden grew, and Ghost, gray now around the eyes but no less alert, kept his place near the cedar, watching every sunset as if counting them. One morning, Evelyn found Misu painting on the barn wall. Not words, just symbols, Lakota patterns in red and ochre and gold. She smiled and let him finish. The schoolhouse, once plain and quiet, now wore color like memory wears warmth. And beneath that cedar tree, a boy who had died unnamed now rested with his history intact, guarded by the soul of a dog and the voices of the living. The town would forget many things, but not this place, not this boy, not the dog who guarded names.